So today's February 26th, 2025. It's a preliminary matter. The sporting night chair of the Newbury Planning Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Planning Board members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Peter Pecos,
Yes, sir.
Larry Murphy,
Here,
Mary Stone. Don't see her. She may be joining us soon. Scott Kenter. Don't see Scott either. Hopefully he'll be joining us as well. And Steve Mangian, associate member.
Here.
Hello, Steve. Town staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Kristen Grubbs, planning director.
Here.
D'Angelo Rowe, assistant planner.
yes,
And Martha Taylor, special projects planner.
Here.
Very good. Good evening. February 26th, 2025, open meeting of the Newbury Planning Board is being conducted remotely consistent with Chapter 3 of the Acts of 2023, which extends the governor's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. GL 330A 20 until March 31st, 2025. For this meeting, the Newbury Planning Board is convening by video conference via Zoom, as posted on the Planning Board's agenda, which can be found at the town's website. You may join us by going to http://zoom US and entering meeting ID number 832-7141-3056, passcode 108790, or by calling 1-929-205-6099 US and entering the meeting ID number and passcode when prompted. For Zoom meetings, please note that this meeting is being recorded and that attendees and participants are participating by video and or telephone conference. The meeting is also being broadcast live through Local Access Channel 9 and on Zoom, and the recording will be available on the Newbury Access YouTube channel. Before we turn to the first item on the agenda, please permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. As chair, I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After speakers conclude their remarks, I'll go down the list of board members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. The meeting tonight includes a public hearing for the zoning amendments for the annual town meeting. At 6:30, the clerk will read the legal notice, and there will be presentation of slides followed by opportunity for the planning board members to speak. After the board members have spoken, I will afford the public an opportunity to comment and or ask questions. I will seek questions and comments through the Zoom raised hand function in the order in which the people click on the raised hand button. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So before we have Larry read do we want to do approval of meeting minutes, or do we want to do that at the end? No preference? We have meeting minutes for February 19th, 2025. Has everyone here had a chance to review them?
I have it. I'm fine with everything.
Okay. Pete?
I just have a point of order. Larry, do we have a quorum?
Yeah, you and Woody.
Okay, cool. Great.
Oh, all
Super,
right.
thanks.
Thanks for clarifying that, Pete. So I've reviewed the minutes as well. We'll do a roll call vote. Does anyone have any questions or comments? No? Larry already said he didn't. Pete, you don't?
I'm good.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes for February 19th, 2025.
So
I'll
moved.
make that motion.
I get a
And a second.
motion,
And a
a
second.
second from Pete. Thank you. Roll call vote. Pete,
Yes.
Larry,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes as well. So there's the meeting minutes out of the way. Larry, could you read the public hearing notice?
Well, I read it at the last meeting and I wasn't anticipating having to read it again. So if I need to, I don't have it. Someone can put it up on the screen if it needs to be
Okay.
read again.
Can someone clarify if it needs to be read again? If the public hearing's still open and it doesn't need to be read again, we won't read it. I
I
just
think
need
you're
to know.
all set.
Okay, good, because I have a copy
Hearing's
here.
still
from the school.
open, so you're good.
Okay, very good. So I'll turn it over to Kristen.
Great. Thanks so much, Woody, and for everybody for this continued hearing. As discussed at the last meeting, we were able to follow up on a couple of the outstanding questions on the zoning amendments. We met with town council, Martha and Daniel, and I met with town council on Tuesday afternoon. Our thinking tonight, if this works for the board, is to review the items that were under discussion at the last meeting. And we have a memo that just highlights those items. So I can share that, and then if we have, and we can go through it, and if there are any specific questions where we want to pull up the drafts of the complete bylaw and look at all of the language, we can also do that. I have all those ready to go as well. Does that sound good, Woody and all?
Yeah. Yes.
Great. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So we, one of the bylaw amendments is specifically about accessory dwelling units or ADUs. In doing, and this is a complete, replace the town's current accessory apartment bylaw with new language. So in reviewing all the new language one more time with town council, there were a couple minor changes that did not come up at the last meeting, but we wanted to highlight for you. There's nothing of content being changed. This first bullet, town council recommended to delete the term protected use ADU. This is a term that the state's regulations about ADUs uses to distinguish between a ADU by right, which is a protected use, versus an ADU that still requires a special permit, which is a discretionary approval. So because our bylaw does not use this term protected use anywhere else in the bylaw, but we had it as a definition, the recommendation is that we don't include a definition of something that isn't currently in our bylaw. I think in the future, if town meeting and the planning board and the community decide to make edits to the bylaw, this may be a term that we bring back in to distinguish again more clearly between ADUs that are by right and protected versus a special permit. But at the moment, it's not needed to be included because it's not a term that's used. Any questions about that?
I recall that we anticipated that there'd be some future editorial changes at the last meeting, and this certainly seems to meet that criteria.
Great, thanks, Steve. Let's see. Okay, So this in bold and underlined is a phrase that was recommended to be added to the definition. So again, to clarify that the definition of accessory dwelling unit includes a both attached and detached unit from the principal dwelling unit. It seemed like this added clarity, and the current definition didn't include anything referencing whether it was attached or detached, but those are qualities of ADUs that are discussed in other parts of the bylaw, so it seemed important to add it to the definition for clarity. Moving on. The floodplain bylaw, and I'm happy to, there's a few items here, so I'm happy to bring up the bylaw if that is easier. Most of them we did discuss and look at the last, at the first part of this hearing. So it was essentially confirming with Lisa that the changes that were, the edits that were made and that had been suggested by DCR, by their floodplain management staff when they reviewed this bylaw, the changes that were recommended by DCR that we had chosen to make and were in the bylaw you reviewed last time are approved now by town council. So those included striking this section because it was redundant, and edits had been added later on in the bylaw that were duplicative to this language, so it wasn't needed anymore. Lisa, town council, agreed with that. The next one, the state had made a mistake in their model zoning bylaw and neglected to include zones A and AO, so those were added back in. So that was approved by town council. This one is under the addition of used for 180 days or less as a clarification to what temporary means. So town council agreed that that was an important addition because it defines what is meant by temporary. Let's see. Okay, maybe the next two, Martha and Daniel chime in, but I'm thinking I might just bring up the whole bylaw for these next two. It might be easier
It might be helpful.
for the board to look at.
Excuse me, I agree. I'd bring up the bylaw.
Just grab it. Okay. So working with my two screens here. Where to go? Okay. Okay, these are the last two changes. Well, we just discussed this 180 days or less. This letter G in this section 12 of permitted uses, the language that was previously in our current bylaw, this is language that exists, that letter G, buildings lawfully existing prior to the adoption of these provisions. DCR's comment, you can see on the right here, that recommended this was not needed or recommended removing this because the building code regulations in terms of damage and repair of a structure is applicable. So that's DCR disagreed with removing this. Her opinion was this is a true statement that this buildings lawfully existing prior to these provisions are permitted use, and we should keep that. And I don't think the comment from DCR was not, was a recommendation for clarity, for clarification purposes, and not something that we understand to be a requirement by FEMA or by DCR. And then the last one for this bylaw, there's this definition of alter, which was proposed by the town to be added. In the course of the reviews of this bylaw, the proposal was to add this definition of alter. However, DCR flagged this as a question, and Daniel and Martha and I, in reviewing this, we looked to see where the word alter is used in the rest of the bylaw, in which it would merit a definition, like be helpful to the interpretation to have a definition of alter. And the only place the word alter is used is actually the word alteration. And it's used in sections of the bylaw that say the alteration of a wall or ceiling in a structure. So in every case where alter, in the majority of cases where alter is used, it's used as a description of a component of construction. However, this definition of alter is straight from the wetlands protection bylaw, and it talks, actually, it references alteration of a water course, you know, of a water body of wetlands. And that definition is not relevant anywhere in this bylaw. There's no reference in the bylaw that says altering a wetlands or altering a water course. So this could stay, but I think the recommendation from staff is that it's not necessary to be added. So we could strike it.
That be really thing.
So Kristen, I'm a little bit confused. So is town council recommending that we retain that language?
In our discussion with her, she suggested it stay. However, we did not actually do the exercise I just described that we at the staff level did, which was look at how the word is used in the bylaw. And we didn't have a chance to circle back with her today, but I think she would agree. Our recommendation is that this is not necessary. If it stays, if the board is comfortable keeping it, that's fine. Our recommendation would be that we change the definition to say alteration of a water course, because that's what this definition is about. It's not about altering a structure.
Okay, just note, Kristen, alteration is misspelled there.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, so that's a decision the board should consider. We can either modify this language that is being added in this way that I've just written, or we could just not include this addition.
So Kristen, if I understand correctly, we won't use this definition anywhere else. Is that correct?
Correct. It's a definition that's taken from the Wetlands Protection Act, and it's a legal valid definition, but it just doesn't pertain to this bylaw in any place.
So the definition is not necessary for the bylaw.
Correct.
Larry, what are your thoughts?
If it's not necessary and the state is suggesting it be removed, um, I guess maybe we ought to remove it, but I'm a little troubled by the fact that town council. But town council wanted to leave alteration, or did she recommend using alteration of a water course?
No. I mean, she thought it was appropriate to have alter because the word alter was mentioned in 12 instances in the bylaw. But again, when we looked at where the word alter is used, and I could pull up a couple of them if that's helpful. It's not about it. This isn't the definition that word is being used for. It says alteration of a ceiling or structure during construction. It's not talking about altering an area subject to protection under MGL, which is the Wetlands Protection Act. I know this is confusing.
So
It took us a while of reading it through to understand.
So Kristen, the question is the word alter used or is the word alteration used currently?
There's one place where the word alter is used about altering a sand dune. But otherwise the word alteration is used. I'll find an example if that's helpful. Oh, so this is the definition we're looking at. So here's an example. For a substantial improvement, the actual start of construction means the first alteration of any wall, ceiling, floor, or other structural part of the building, whether or not that alteration affects the external dimensions of the building. Down here, in the course of construction, alteration, or repair, not intended for use in such construction, alteration, or repair. None of these references have to do with altering as defined by the Wetlands Protection Act.
So the word that is used in the bylaw is alteration, not alter. Is that correct?
I'm just confirming that there's no word where alter is used. I don't believe there is.
Then Woody, my thought would be that if the word alter is not used, then there should not be a definition of it.
I agree.
Yeah, the only place the word alter is used is in this added language in the definition.
So you've just pulled up where DCR recommends striking everything in blue,
Correct.
and we would strike the definition of alter as well. 16, or that would stay.
It's just striking what's in blue. There are other definitions that stay.
Okay. Pete and Larry, how do you feel about that?
Oh, we take it out.
I would agree, since the word alter is not used anywhere necessary for a definition, it's alteration which is used, then why define a word that's not used?
Not only that, but we want the state to be happy with the final result as well. Because we are just trying to stay eligible for the flood insurance program.
Good point, Larry.
Okay. Thank you for talking through that. Okay. Okay. Martha or Dan, do you want me to keep going or do you want to take this one? We're back to the final discussion about the general provisions.
I'd say you're on a roll. Keep going.
Okay, please chime in. So I think all of us appreciate the conversation that was had at the opening of the public hearing. And we did our best to talk through the questions and concerns that were raised and share the public comments that were made. Town council definitely agreed by one of the comments from David Powell, which was the title of this Article 1 bylaw. It said purpose and intent, but there had been additions to the section that talked about the authority and other components of the zoning bylaw beyond purpose and intent. So everyone agreed with the recommendation, which was to change the title to purpose and authority, which better describes what the article is doing. Then we discussed the phrase increasing amenities. And this, let's see, town council's recommendation about this language stems from a consideration of Newbury zoning bylaw, which goes back to when the town did not have special permit criteria specifically. So in some cases, when a permitting board or a permitting authority, planning board, zoning board is looking at evaluating an application, it's helpful to have general criteria named in this purposes section that allows both the applicant and the permitting authority to look at the bylaw for guidance. So part of the zoning recodification is adding those special permit criteria, but hand in hand with that, these changes are recommended to give more broad authority and description to the purpose that the zoning bylaw is intended to achieve. So it's for sort of the changes, this is a general comment, but my understanding is the changes being recommended are for the benefit both of applicants and also the permitting authorities. So the change there, as you remember, and I can bring up the specific bylaw if that's helpful. There was sort of a laundry list of things like schools, parks, sewer, and just in a general cleaning up way, it was thought, let's name those as amenities. Martha helped and did an exercise of looking at other town bylaws, and there were a number of towns that use this specific language. So it is increasing amenities is commonly used in zoning bylaws in the purpose section, which is just a helpful aside potentially. In particular, the word increase, we also discussed at the last meeting. That language actually is in the town's current bylaw. As stated here, the current bylaw says to preserve and increase amenities by the promulgation of regulations. So really the recommendation in replacing some of the old language with this new language is bringing this same phrase down. And I don't have it in front of me. I'll bring it up when I stop talking. The phrase, I think it says preserve the historic agricultural.
Cultural.
I
think it's historic, agricultural, cultural.
Benefits of the town. I'm not sure what the noun is. And to increase amenities. So essentially this phrase to preserve and increase was just split apart. So it says preserve historic and agricultural and to increase amenities. So at the end of our discussion, I think staff felt comfortable with the proposed language. Happy to have anyone else chime in or answer any questions. And I will bring that up if that's helpful. Hi, Scott.
Hello. Sorry I'm late, just got home.
No worries at all. Okay.
Anyone have any comments on that?
I'll just say that it seems consistent with what now is the industry standard for this, and it's the language that's commonly used. And, you know, if you forget one in listing a laundry list, this is all inclusive. So I think we've done a full circle discussion on this. So I can appreciate our discussion and where we're at now with this.
And I think that was, that was town council's point, that to make the language broad enough and flexible enough instead of, potentially leaving something, something off the list.
No, I agree with that.
Yes.
I as well. Striking the list and putting that in the way it's worded is probably the best way to do it.
And as Kristen mentioned, I did do a spot check on various zoning bylaws, and virtually all of them had that language of preserving and increasing amenities, including, as Dan's memo indicates, our own.
So the word I was looking for was heritage, to preserve the cultural, historical, and agricultural heritage of the community, to increase the amenities of the town, And I forgot to mention this was also a recommendation from the public comment and discussion at the last hearing, which is to add a reference to the town's master plan, and the recommendation is to use the term long-term planning documents so that it encompasses the housing production plan and the hazard mitigation plan and the open space plan. So again, this is sort of giving the board some guidance in a general way to have decisions support and further the goals of the town's planning documents. And town council was very supportive of adding this phrase that's in yellow here.
Good.
So Woody, that's all I have. If you want to, I don't know if there's, we're still in the public hearing, if the board members have other comments or the public has any comments.
Actually, if I may, I have a couple of things that weren't on Dan's memo, one of which I thought of as I was driving home. So if I might mention those briefly. One is in the ADU. As I was going through formatting today, I noticed that there was a typo in the section on submission requirements. And one of the requirements is that the applicant submit a architectural plan stamped by an architect showing existing conditions, and it says the proposed or the existing and proposed number of buildings, and it's actually supposed to say the existing and proposed number of bedrooms, and that it was intended specifically to help Peter Burnett if he's reviewing proposed ADUs down on Plum Island, to make sure that they're not exceeding the 3. So I'm not quite sure how that typo got in there, but Kristen and I talked about it and agreed based on our conversations with town council that it was supposed to be bedrooms.
Good.
And the other thing I wanted to mention is we did also talk to her about the change that we discussed last time in the OSRD about the trigger, if I can call it that. You know, right when we changed the language from shall to may, and it said more than 4 lots or units would be the trigger. And we discussed changing it to 3 or more, so that anybody who wants to submit a subdivision that's will result in 3 or more lots would be allowed to do so. The language, if we don't change it, precludes that possibility. And town council agreed that that was a reasonable change within the scope of this public hearing. It's making it less restrictive.
Martha, is it 3 or more lots or 3 or more units?
It says 3 or more lots or units as it was amended last time. So those were the only 2 that I had.
Very good. Any other questions on that? All right. I don't have any questions. What's next? Is there any raised hands on any of this?
Oh, sorry, I just had one other thing in the OSRD. We also, David had rightly pointed out that we should reference the chapter's number for the OSRD rules and regulations. So that's chapter 112, and that's been added.
Okay. So, not hearing any more questions or comments. Is there
David,
any raised
Actually,
hand?
sorry,
raised.
Woody, there is a raised hand. Yeah, David.
Go ahead, David, you're muted.
Okay, I know. I just was wondering, do we have or do you have, I should say, at this point, what the purpose and intent final thing is going to look like? Because it seems to me, just trying to follow the discussion earlier, that there's sort of fragmented stuff about, this phrase, that phrase, but is there anything that shows, okay, now what is that? That is the current thing that's going to be offered to the town?
This is these yellow markings are for the purpose of this meeting to highlight for the board and the
Okay.
public what the changes are. So those will be cleaned up. The strike through language is strike
Right.
through.
Uh,
The comments will be cleaned up, and then this is the proposed language.
am I missing something in that? Wasn't there discussion about housing being part of this purpose?
We did discuss that previously. That isn't in this current version, but it could be added. There was a phrase up here.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking, that there seemed to be the last time you discussed this when I was around, that had gotten dropped out. And I think I had found, and I think Martha concurred, that other communities do cite housing as being a primary purpose. And in view of the current situation, both regard to the state and our own town, I think not to have it in there is would be unfortunate, to say the least. Yes, no, somebody?
It certainly, I'll let the board members speak, but I think the reason it was not carried down was just aligned with the sort of moving to be more general and less specific. So by calling out housing, or I should say,
No, but that.
calling out housing is included in, for instance, a comment about furthering the goals of Newbury's long-term planning documents, which would include housing planning. And I also think increasing the amenities, I would say the perspective of town council is that that would include all of these other things that are
No,
listed
I'm sorry.
above.
I'm sorry, there's no way I buy that. There's no way.
You can
I buy-
disagree, for sure. I'm just trying to explain what
Well, I
the
know, but
discussion was.
okay, what I'm suggesting is that I understand the idea of embracing something so it's a bit more inclusive, so particularly in regard to planning documents. However, I just think that housing is at the center of what the planning board deals with day after day, week after week. And not to cite that as a purpose seems to me to be myopic at best. Housing is not an amenity of the town unless it happens to be public housing, as in, a housing trust situation, and we don't have one of those. So if you want to let it go, that's just fine. But I think you are doing the residents of Newbury a long-term disservice at this point.
Woody?
Yes, go right ahead, Pete.
If I could, Dave, I think, the fact that we have now a well-defined accessory dwelling unit component of our bylaws, and the fact that we reference the documents, our master plan and our housing production plan, that steers the guidance. So I don't want to get, I can appreciate what you're saying, and I don't want you to take offense, but I think that the intent is to have a broad highway here as opposed to a narrow one. And I understand the needs of the housing for all income levels. We all do. But what we're trying to do is be consistent with all of the goals of Newbury and not just focus or signal out one. So what is highlighted under B is to be inclusive of everything, of all the documents and all the energies that have gone into those documents. So this kind of steers you towards, okay, what's the housing production document look like? What does the master plan look like? And that's where the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to do are, where this is kind of the guidance toward. So I guess it can just be, how we want to look at how we want to look at the pieces of paper.
Right. Well, I don't buy it, Peter, very simply.
I understand the difference.
An elegant explanation, but I simply do not buy it. It doesn't work that way.
Okay, do you have any other comments, David?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much, Woody.
David, do you have any other comments?
No, I was just asking about that in specifics, and okay, I've tried, and it's a public hearing, so it will be publicly available and people can see and judge for themselves. But I still think you're off on a couple of wrong tracks here. The major thing, as far as I'm concerned, is that the whole idea of increasing amenities, even though it was in the purpose before and other towns may have it, it's simply, to me, doesn't hold water, because planning boards do not have agency. They do not have agency to essentially do what it is that you would need to do to improve something. So you simply don't have the instrumentality. But there you go. Perhaps
well,
my understanding of English language is different from yours.
Okay, well, David, thank you for your participation and your comments. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Kristen, what do we have to do next now with this?
So I guess, if there are no additional questions or, discussion, then the board would vote to approve the zoning amendments as modified and as discussed and modified, and recommend that they, be, or take a vote to recommend inclusion in the town warrant for annual town meeting. Recommend to the
Okay.
select board.
Okay, first, if no one has any other questions or comments, and there are no more raised hands, correct? Not seeing any. All right, and I'm not hearing anything from the board, so I would say there's no more comments or questions. I would, first off, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Larry. Roll call vote. Close the public hearing. Pete Pecos,
Yes,
Larry Murphy,
Yes,
Mary's not with us. Scott Kenter,
Yes.
Steve, how do you feel?
We're done.
Very good. And the chair agrees as well, yeah. So the public hearing is closed. Next, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the changes that we made and pass them on to the select board for their consideration and to go to town meeting.
so moved.
I'll second that.
Okay. Roll call vote. Peter Pecos,
Yes,
Larry Murphy,
Yes,
Scott Kenter,
Yes.
Steve Mangian, how do you feel?
I feel good about it.
Very good. And I vote yes as well, as chair. Okay. Does anyone have any further comments or anything that needs to be discussed this evening?
Woody, if I could, I appreciate
Sure.
all the efforts of town staff, and I appreciate the discussion that we've had over the past two meetings, and I think it's been very helpful, and appreciate the public participation and the chair's handling. Thank you.
Yeah, look, and Woody, I'd really appreciate David, stepping up and participating, and his opinions certainly made me think, about the amenities, but I'm certainly satisfied now. But we appreciate that a lot, David. Thank you.
Yes, and I appreciate David's participation as well. He gave us all something to think about. So, any other words of wisdom? Anyone have anything else to say? No? Not
Would
hearing anything?
Would you like a motion to adjourn?
That would be great.
There you go, sir.
And do I have a second?
Okay.
Very good. Roll call vote. Peter,
Yes,
Larry,
sir.
yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Steve,
For sure.
and I vote yes as well. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night. And thanks for your help with everything.